I'm James Turk. I'm a director for the Gold Money Foundation, and I'm here with Thorsten Polleit, who's the chief economist in Germany for one of the large British investment banks there. Thorsten, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much.
There are a number of things I want to talk to you about, but I know you're one of the few people in the banking system who is an Austrian economist. Did you actually study Austrian economics in school?
I would say, I got socialized as a mainstream economist, all this Keynesianism, monetarism, but I must say I always had an inclination for monetarism, and later on I got into contact with the work of Hayek, Ludwig von Mises, and I took it from there, and over time I got into this kind of Austrian school of economics issues, and still to this very day my thinking is very much based on what the Austrian had to say.
Yeah, so you're a believer in the Austrian theory of the business cycle.
Absolutely. This is one of the great achievements, I would say, in monetary history. Ludwig von Mises was basically the founding father of the Austrian monetary trade cycle theory. He combined important elements, the currency, school thinking, Böhm-Bawerk's interest and capital theory, and he also included the work of Knut Wicksell, the Swedish economist, and he came up with, I would say, a very decent explanation of the boom and bust cycle caused by fiat currencies.
Yeah. If Mises were alive today, what would you think he would make of the euro?
I think he would be very concerned about the future of this single currency, first and foremost because it is a fiat currency. Mises, at a relatively early stage, saw the problems that come with fiat money. He was, I would say, very much aware that fiat money is really disturbing the free market forces, causing various economic and social and political trouble, and I would say he wouldn't have a strong kind of optimism, I would say, as far as the future of this single currency is concerned.
Yeah, one of the things he always focused on in terms of my reading of his work was the proper allocation of capital, and that during a fiat currency system you often get malinvestment or bad allocations of capital. Capital going into areas that would not otherwise go into if it wasn't for the easy money policies of banks and central banks. So he might be concerned about all of the capital that went into homes in the south of Spain and are now sitting there idle because those homes were built because of easy money, not because of sound economic investment decisions.
Absolutely. The symptoms of fiat currencies are boom and bust cycles, and also in particular the bubbles in stock markets, the bubbles in housing markets, and even the bubbles in the bond markets the world over are a clear symptom of this fiat currency consequences. And Mises pointed out the root cause of the problem is really bank credit expansion, as he called it, which increases the money stock in the economy. He called it money creation out of thin air. So whenever a bank lends to, say, a consumer or a corporate or public sector entity, it increases the money stock. And in addition, the increase in the supply of so-called bank circulation credit lowers the market interest rate to the so-called natural interest rate. That is the interest rate that would prevail had there not been an artificial increase in bank lending. And so you have all these kind of malinvestments. You have a short period of a boom, which is then followed by bust.
Yeah. Are you also an adherent of Murray Rothbard's point of view that we really should have almost no fractional reserve banking because it's a dishonest banking in his view?
James, I'm a great admirer of what Murray Rothbard did. He, I think, brought the Austrian school in terms of its praxeological, as Mises would call it, orientation towards a new to a new high. And one of his great achievements is, of course, that he put out a great book. It's called The Mystery of Banking, which I can only recommend having a read. And I think he very much did the proper analysis on the basis of property rights. And on the basis of property rights, he analyzed the workings of the fiat monetary system, and that is, of course, based on fractional reserve banking, which becomes, of course, a root problem of the whole system.
Yeah, one of the tenets of Austrian economics, particularly in the monetary sphere, is what Mises called the crack-up boom. Is there evidence of that today here in Europe?
The crack-up boom is really an expression coined by Ludwig von Mises, and I would say it's based on his experience in the early 1920s when there was hyperinflation in Austria and to an even stronger degree in the former Deutsches Reich in Germany at that time, which, by the way, was not just a high or hyperinflation. It was, in a sense, a perfect hyperinflation that took place in Germany because it not only debased the currency, the former Reichsmark, but it completely destroyed the currency. No one would accept the Reichsmark anymore.
It became worthless.
It became completely worthless. It had to be replaced by a new currency. So that is really something special when it comes to monetary history. And the crack-up boom was, I would say, he saw how people would react in an environment where people would expect that there will be ever greater increases in the money supply. So he saw at some point people would just want to get out of fiat currency, exchanging it against any other real assets. And that is what he called fiat money, and technically speaking, it's actually expressive of a breakdown of the economy's demand for money.
Yeah, I call that a flight from currency, in a sense that people don't want to hold the currency, and therefore they want to do something with it as quickly as possible. Are we seeing a decrease for demand for currency here in Europe? As I understand it, the deposits in the European banking system, both in Northern Europe as well as Southern Europe, have been declining. People are exiting not only the banking system, they seem to be exiting the euro as well.
James, I would say at the moment we see an extraordinarily high degree of confidence in fiat currencies. When I read the newspapers or talk to institutional investors, they would tell that they're going to sell risky assets, by which they mean, for instance, stocks or precious metals like gold and silver, and exchange it into fiat currency or fiat currency denominated bonds like the treasury bonds in the US or the bunds in Europe. And I would say that investor confidence is still very much oriented towards the fiat currencies.
But
it's not a flight out of fiat currencies at the moment.
Yeah, but that confidence I gather from the way you've speaking, and based on some of the things I've read that you've written, that confidence is misguided.
Unfortunately, I would say if there's no change in policy making, if there's not really a change in which the architecture of our monetary system is kept, I would say we are heading towards such a scenario as outlined by Ludwig von Mises, because you're going to end up in a situation where the economic and political problems will become so severe that most people would consider the printing up of new money as the policy of the least evil.
So we're on the wrong road, heading in the wrong direction. What's it going to take to turn around and go back in the right direction? Is that possible?
I would say it is possible, because what we see is man-made, and so we can change it. Mises also in the early 1920s, actually, he came forward with a recommendation for a return to sound money, as he called it. And he said the most important issue is not a technicality, it is the thinking of the people. People would have actually understand that the printing up of ever greater amounts of money doesn't create any wealth, and that they have to abandon inflationist theories, which are of course marketed worldwide when you look at highly decorated economists. And so it has to start with a change in people's mind. And once that is achieved, which is of course a very difficult thing, and I'm personally not really optimistic that this can be done in a short period of time, then for instance Mises or Murray Rothbard made some recommendations of how to restore sound money, namely returning to a kind of gold standard as a first step, and then allowing for a competition of currencies. That could be a solution.
Yeah, I guess what you're saying is that in terms of where we're headed and people changing their minds, one way the minds will be changed is if we have a crack-up boom, because they will learn that they were mistaken in terms of their viewpoint. But the preferred solution would be education and political will. First, so that people understand that the problems that are why they're there, why they arise, and why we're headed in the wrong direction, and then combine that with political will by leaders so that they can actually steer a better educated public in the right direction to avoid going over the cliff.
Well, it's hard to say whether this change in monetary affairs will be a smooth process or whether it will be a rather difficult process in terms of its political and economic consequences. I'm inclined to think the latter will be the case, but that shouldn't keep us from educating people, to make people familiar with the workings of the Austrian School of Economics, because I think it provides the highest standards in terms of its economic and ethical foundation in the field of, let's say, macroeconomics or economics as such. And I find that the Austrian school is no longer really taught, let's say, in the US. But I have to say, in the US, we have the epicenter of Austrian economics, the Ludwig von Mises Institute in Auburn, Alabama. Mm-hmm. But over here in Europe, it has really disappeared. I mean, the Austrian school has disappeared from universities. And I think it's very important to make people, again, familiar with their teachings. And I would say, if we want to have a revolution, it starts with the Austrians.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because here at the, we're here at the Go Ahead Business Conference in Vienna, Austria, and I've spoken to a couple of people who are clearly, Austrian thinking, and I asked, well, did you learn it in school, when you were here at the university in Vienna? And they said no, they only learned about Austrian economics after they graduated and started reading, and things like Mises.org and various other ways about the Austrian school. I found that very ironic. But it's clear that both sides of the Atlantic, I think the Austrian school is starting to gain more and more adherents, simply because of the logic upon which it's built, and of course the most fundamental point, which is Mises' great book, Human Action. Economics is not about mathematic models; it's about people interacting with one another, taking actions to improve their situations in life voluntarily in the marketplace.
Absolutely, I think the Austrians actually make a very humane case. It's about property rights. It's respecting other people's property, and as you say, it's logic in a sense, and that is, of course, due to Mises' reconstruction of economics along the line of what I mentioned earlier, praxeology, and that is the logic of human action. And he has a completely different basis from which to start to deal with all the important economic aspects, be it money, be it exchange, be it pricing processes in the market system. And if you really think it through, you find the deficiencies of, let's say, the mainstream economic thinking. And as you know, the mainstream economic thinking is really guiding policy making around the world. We shouldn't be surprised to see all these problems. But as you say, there's growing interest, I would say, in the Austrian School of Economics.
Yeah, I agree. I want to turn to markets, but before I do, I just want to say to the viewers of this video that if they want to learn more about it, I would highly recommend going to Mises.org, M-I-S-E-S.org, and download for free a pamphlet by Marie Rothbard called What Has Government Done to Our Money? It would be a very good introduction into the Austrian School of Economic Thinking. Yeah, you agree?
But, of course. I mean, one of the first recommendations I hand out to my students.
Oh, okay, okay, that's good.
Along the line with the mystery of banking.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great book as well. Turning now to markets a little bit, let's look over at the other side of the Atlantic. How do you see the situation in the United States? They talk about a jobless recovery, but how can you have a recovery if unemployment is still high? Economic activity is about people working, not about collecting unemployment from the government. How do you see the situation developing over there?
Let me start by saying I see the problems in the US related to the problems in the euro area or in the UK. It's a global problem caused by fiat money. Yeah. And so that is the starting point of my thinking. And I would say The fiat money system over the last decades has brought about a situation of over-indebtedness. There's too much debt relative to incomes, and so either you have to write down the debt, or you would have to start printing up ever greater amounts of money for paying down your debt. And the third option, which is once in a while to be heard, is maybe there's a chance of growing out of this debt. And from your presentation, I took the impression that you would think this is not possible, and I share very much this thinking. So the great risk really is that people will see the printing up of ever greater amounts of money as a proper remedy to the debt crisis caused by fiat currencies. And politically speaking, it might be the most convenient way to do it. Economically speaking, it's the most terrible thing to do, to ruin the currency. And you know, if there's a choice to be made, just from an economic standpoint, I would say writing down the debt is the proper way of dealing with it.
Yeah, I would agree with you, because if you ruin the currency, or impair or hurt the currency, do things that are harmful to it, you're ultimately hurting economic activity, because the currency is essential for people to interact in a level playing field, or what hopefully is a level playing field, what we call the economy. The currency is central to that. So if you have an impaired currency, you're ultimately hurting economic activity as well.
Yeah, and two things come to my mind. Number one, as you say, ruining the currency is maybe the worst thing you can do, because you destroy interpersonal cooperation. You're sowing the seeds of embitterment, of distrust, and that hurts, of course, economic activity. And the second thing is thinking about, just ramping up inflation from, let's say, 3 to 6%, as some economists recommend, doesn't work. It's going to end in hyperinflation, because inflation does only the trick of a coercive redistribution of income if it comes as a surprise. As soon as people adopt, let's say, from expecting 6% inflation, you wouldn't have available the means of this coercive redistribution of income, so you would have to go to an inflation of, let's say, 8%, and then the thing spirals out of control. And again, inflation is not really the option of getting rid of the debt problem caused in the fiat money system. It's a tough choice, but I would say, from weighing the costs and benefits as an economist from the Austrian school, cutting down the debt is the proper way.
Yeah. What are the prospects of cutting down the debt? I mean, it just seems that everything is being geared the other direction to try to put more debt into the system. And it defies logic and reason that when you have a debt problem, more debt is not going to solve a debt problem.
It's like kicking the can down the road, isn't it? And of course, so far we talked about, let's say, sound economics, as the Austrians would recommend, and you bring us into the field of policy making, real world policy making. And of course, there are interest groups in our societies which prefer, that there's ever greater amount of debt and money at ever lower interest rates to keep the system going. And many people, not only politicians, but many people have subscribed to this kind of policy. Think about many people holding their lifetime savings in fiat currencies. Yeah. They might prefer, the hope that more fiat money is going to solve the problem over a decision of cutting down and wiping out part of their lifetime savings. And so this is really a collective dilemma. But again, that shouldn't deter us as economists from the Austrian school to come up with a proper recommendation.
Would you say that this money printing mentality that we see pretty much throughout the world, is that because that's the soft political option? It enables politicians not to make the hard decision, the right decision that really needs to be done?
Oh, sure. That appears at least to be the easy way out. And of course, it is also backed by false theories. Nowadays, mainstream economists would say, well, if the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank increases the money stock, it's neutral. It doesn't harm. It doesn't really affect the economy and the financial wealth in a bad way. But of course, this is a false theory. Of course, any increase in the money supply in the economy lead necessarily so to a redistribution of income. This is the economic truth. And again, that is rooted basically in Mises' reconstruction of economics.
Yeah, there's another element to that. You know, being trained as a banker, I recognize that if there are bad debts out there, moving those bad debts from a bank into the central bank doesn't make those bad debts disappear. All it did is it maybe made them liquid, but it didn't improve the quality of those bad debts. If a debtor has too much debt that he can never possibly repay, that has to be recognized. You can't hide that. And I see now the ECB has 170 billion euros of sovereign debt on its balance sheet acquired from various Mediterranean countries. Isn't that making the ECB insolvent?
Of course, the damage has been done, so to speak, and the only question is who's going to pay for it? Is it the money holder? Is it the saver? Is it the stockholder of banks? Is it government employees, government beneficiaries? So we are right in the midst of a struggle. Who's going to pay for it? And the easy way at the moment is obviously to dump all these assets no one wants to hold with the central bank. And of course, the ECB has made these purchases, and I would say that it will increase the purchases because the underlying logic and the underlying automatism that comes with this decision will lead to ever greater purchases of money, of bonds, and thereby increasing the money stock further. And there are differences in opinion. The Germans, the Austrians are very much against it, but obviously the majority in the European Central Bank Council has made this decision. It is a deliberate act, so to speak, and that doesn't bode well, of course, for the future of the euro, in particular as such a policy action should have been excluded right from the start through the statute of the European Central Bank. It's a break of rules, so to speak.
Yeah, they broke the rules, exactly. Well, it'll be interesting to see how that all unfolds in the weeks and months ahead. This video is going to be viewed by thousands of people, on the Gold Money Foundation website. Do you have any parting comments about Austrian economics or the year or anything else that you would like to leave as the last comments?
Well, yeah, I would like to take this opportunity to say, people should start reading what the Austrians have to say. And as you said earlier, a good starting point is the Mises Institute in Auburn, Alabama. They have fantastic daily articles, a great library. You can download books in PDF for free, and you can engage you can get into contact with other people from all around the world. It's a fantastic platform. They do, of course, seminars. There's an Austrian School of Economists conference every year, and so maybe people would like to attend, and I would highly recommend going into it and learning more about it and spreading the news.
Yeah, I agree with you, Thorsten. Education is really the most important thing. And given all of the uncertainties we have worldwide, I think people really have to pick up some of those pamphlets from Mises.org and other things, attend conferences to learn a little bit about it, get a different point of view, and maybe make some decisions that will be helpful to them to get through these uncertain times. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been speaking with Thorsten Polleit. Thank you very much, Thorsten. It's been a real pleasure.
James.
Thank you.